Welcome to Avant-Garde Entrepreneur. I am so glad you're here today with me, my friend. Today, we are wrapping up the spring season of the podcast, talking about how to clear the static and connect with your inner voice. Essentially, it's the power of intuition. It's been an incredible season of Avant-Garde Entrepreneur, loaded with practical tips and strategies for you to uplevel your social enterprise and build the mindset, mental resilience, and endurance you need to operate at a higher level in business and in life. But not everything that we've shared this season is for you right now. I want you to start with one thing, whether it's something in marketing or creating your pitch deck or whatever it is. Start with one thing, not add a pile to your list, because otherwise we just get overloaded and we don't do anything. And one of the great things about the podcast is it's designed to be evergreen so that you can come back and listen to it again and again and hear something different than what you're hearing right now. And there's so much noise out there. There's so much information, and it can be really overwhelming to tune into what's right for us. So while I try to curate content for you that I know is just for you, my content, what you learn from me, is probably added on to a lot of other things that you hear out there. But what is certain is that for you to get to the next level in your business, in your life, it's going to require you to do and be something different than you were before, or possibly than you are right now. So, how do you know out of all the information that's out there, what is right for you? Our guest today is Jenn Cohen. She's an expert in helping leaders tune into the power of their intuition, and she's going to clear up some of these mysteries for us. Jenn has always been captivated by the power of intuition, and after a life-changing experience in her 20s, she explored how intuition could shape her life and career. During her 27 years in the entertainment industry, Jenn found that intuitive decisions often led to success. Now, as an intuitive consultant, she helps individuals and organizations unlock their potential, gain clarity, and achieve their goals through practical, intuition based strategies. Jenn's work fosters growth, creativity, and purpose in both professional and personal realms. Jenn, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, Jenn, let's backtrack to what happened in your 20s as a foundation for our discussion, our chat today.
Sure. So when I was 20 years old, I was just starting my junior year of college and got the unexpected phone call that my father had passed.
Mm.
And the evening of his funeral, I was obviously very distraught. And I was lying on his side of my parents' bed and just kind of calling out and saying, why? Why? What do I do now? And I was in pitch black darkness, and the light next to my side of the bed just flashed on and off and on and off. And I called out and I said, Dad, is that you? And flashed on and off and on and off. And it wasn't a circuit break. It wasn't, the neighborhood didn't lose power. It was clearly a sign that there was something there and something was communicating, and I was connected with something that was not of physical form anymore. And I always believed that, but to have that confirmation was what set me off onto a different knowing, I'll say. And so I went back up to college and I continued to get these signs where I'd be walking under streetlights and they'd just kind of flash on and off. And I'd get other kinds of signs where people wouldn't even notice, but it was me noticing those and knowing what was behind those flickering that started to tune me in to this thing that we call intuition. In my grief, I was feeling, obviously very sad about all the milestones that I wouldn't be able to experience with my father, but also I was feeling very unsafe because obviously that's the masculine figure in my life at that time. And so the anger part of grief, basically, and I didn't even understand at the time, I do now, is I gave him a job and we made a pact that he was always going to take care of me through my profession.
Mm.
And he gratefully accepted that.
Mm.
And I knew it. And doesn't mean that I didn't have to work at it, but I didn't have to worry about it.
Mm.
And so I was very open to the signs and the synchronicities. A lot of people call them coincidences. I like to call them synchronicities that came into my life that led me onto a career path that was extremely gratifying for 27 years in the entertainment industry. And then when I was ready to leave the entertainment industry, he led me into this intuitive consultant journey.
Mm. So full circle. Wow.
Yeah,
Protected you on your path and brought you to where you are to be now. I'd like to focus on the power of intuition in our discussion, but I'd also like for the listeners to get to learn a little bit more about your career. I haven't shared much of it in the entertainment industry, but if you could give our listeners an idea, most of them are not from the United States, so their idea of what American life is like is what they see on TV or Netflix or whatever. So, can you give them a little bit of a sense of what your career was like?
sure. So I worked in film, in television, and in marketing basically on those, but I also did work in production. So that's those two, I'll just split those in two because there's kind of the corporate side of the house, which is, making sure that the creative that is being created, the shows that are being created are seen and are marketed to the correct people, distributed, all of those things. And that comes with a lot of data, that comes with a lot of analysis, that comes with a lot of opinions. And then the other side of the house is, much more of the creative energy. And that's where a lot of people can free flow with their intuitive selves. It's where, I like to say that writers are very much channels and actors are very much channels. They're just kind of allowing, their imagination, their creativity to flow through them. So very kind of right side of the brain, where the corporate side is much more the left side of the brain, organization, critical, comparing, oh, how's this network doing to this network, or streamer, this studio to this studio, this actor to this actor, how's it ranking? So my position in my 27 years always found myself right in the middle of those two worlds. And I didn't plan it like that, but I knew that my brain could understand both sides pretty well. And I could translate a little bit more for people that solely, relied on the right side, their imagination, their creativity. That's where intuition lives, to get through the day, and could not understand the rigidness of the left brain. And then I could talk with the left brain people about, oh no, we're going into playland. Like, don't worry, you don't have to scope this out. We can ease up a little bit and have our playful side come in, which is not always easy when you're talking about finances and we're talking about
Mhm.
money and we're talking about billions of dollars and we're talking about lots of people's jobs and we're talking about reputation. And across all of those departments and sectors of the entertainment industry, there's ego.
Mhm.
And the ego is extremely fed in this
Mhm.
industry. And so my role, and again, I didn't set out for this, but it's where my intuition led me. So anytime I would land myself in a marketing job, it was fascinating to watch that whenever I would interact with the production side or the creative side, it's almost like I would become part of that department.
Mhm.
And I couldn't put it into words. It was just that I was able to tap into that part. So that's it in a nutshell.
Wow. It's such a gift to be able to be in the middle and to be able to identify with the people who are focused on in money mode and very much driven by their ego and what's familiar. And then to also be able to really empathize and be on the same page with people who are really in their spirit and really truly channels for whatever comes through. It's interesting. One of the things I notice is even with my husband and I very much make decisions based on my intuition. And my husband is an engineer by training and is a business broker
Mhm.
by profession. So it's very much data, facts, what's real is what matters, not what's not. we live in two different worlds. So it's interesting whenever we're having discussions about, making decisions. When you were working with the executives on the more left brain side, can the gifts of intuition be taught to someone who's in that space and they're really programmed and goal oriented and they're kind of in, I want to say, fight or flight mode all the time?
Such a good question. Yes. So intuition can be taught because we all have intuition. We refer to it, most of us refer to it as our sixth sense,
Mhm,
and not the I see dead people,
mhm,
entertainment,
mhm,
movie type of sixth sense, and getting over that hurdle is one thing. I like to think of it as our first sense,
mhm,
as we are born into this world, but we all have it.
mhm,
So when I would be dealing with a lot of the executives on more the critical mind part of the business, I would lean into what they were passionate about, um, outside of the actual work being done.
mhm,
And when I could tap into that, and again, it's more of a feeling, it's more of an energy. Even what you were just talking about with your husband when you said he deals in more of the reality of it. I would start to shift that because my reality is just as true
mhm,
as their reality. And
mhm,
so that when I would pick up on something like that, there would typically be a connection that I could make between the creative world and the world that they were talking about. And just those little tiny bridges when we could pull back. And because again, what they're saying and the data that they're giving, okay, fantastic. It's true. It's
mhm,
true. It's true in their world. I just didn't give it more credence than the truth that I knew on the other
mhm,
side. And so it would be kind of creating this bridge and not trying to prove them wrong because they're
mhm,
not, but adding to their truths.
mhm. So it's really owning your own gifts and owning who you are and owning what's real
Absolutely.
because it is real. It is real to you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what the industry. Just when we're talking about entertainment, it obviously coincides with other industries, but you just can't have one side of the house. You're
Hmm.
working in tandem
Hmm.
together for the product, which is the television show or the creative or the film, whatever it is.
Hmm.
So getting past that egoic of they're trying to do this to me and they're making my job hard.
Hmm.
Actually, there's a lot under there,
Hmm.
and when we can get past that fear of what that executive is really operating from, we can then start to dust off those old ways of working
Hmm.
and really bring in this really kind of fun, imaginative way of working. And I would say 9 times out of 10, I would leave that meeting and they would have a different look in their eye. They would have a different energy feel, and they would be inspired in a way that was like, do you think we could get on a meeting with these creatives? Do you think that we could talk with them? Do you think, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's amazing. Because that's what the connection is about, is being able to help people communicate with each other and be on the same kind of the same frequency. They might have different skill
Right.
sets, but having this coming together the same energy. That's amazing.
Yeah.
One of the things I talk about a lot on the podcast, and especially with my students in Avant-Garde Entrepreneur Academy, is the power of quiet time and getting quiet and having stillness. Even if you're a mom of three and your phone is ringing because, or you're getting text because the kitchen is on fire, whatever it is, that obviously those are extreme circumstances, but the importance of having some sort of quiet time during the day, because with social entrepreneurs in particular, they're very much in uncharted territory. And a program that works in one village won't work in a village 5 kilometers away. There's just a very much a divide in things that will and won't work. I talk a lot about that the answers they're facing aren't in a book because, often what we learn from books and the actions that we take are kind of a composite of the things that we learn. It's not just one thing. So when someone is really wanting to harness their intuition, they're on the front line, they're dealing with all kinds of challenges, especially working in developing nations where there's so much need. What are the first steps for harnessing one's intuition for either whether that's personal or professional growth?
Well, I love what you said, the quiet. It's so key because we're surrounded by so much noise and distraction that pattern interrupt is huge. And however you're going to pattern interrupt, and again, it doesn't need to be hours at all. Your intuition is not something, it's not our job to hunt that down. It's our responsibility to get to a place to hear it.
Mhm.
And being able to hear it is really the key. That's the
Mhm.
starting point. So for me, that could be just walking outside for 2 minutes and nature. I love a good hike. The ocean is my best friend. Being able to get into the neutrality of nature
Mhm.
that's not charged,
Mhm.
that is a beautiful way to start to tap into your intuition. And what you can do there is you can start to observe your brain a little bit. When I walk outside and I can hear the birds chirping and I can see the flowers, just naming things and grounding myself in that. So I see a yellow flower, I see an oak tree, I see the blue ocean, and I hear the waves. And it just kind of grounds you in this present moment. And it kind of signals to your brain you're not being attacked. You're not under fire, your kitchen isn't on fire, all those things where it's like, oh, wait, my mind has either gone into worry mode, which is future, or anxiety mode, which is past. And
Mhm.
I'm taking that on in the present right now. And your intuition again can only live in the present moment. So that's just the very first tip is getting your body and your nervous system into a neutral state. And the quickest way I have found is nature, water, if you can't
Mhm.
get outside, a quick shower, if you can, running your hands under cold water. But water is, I mean, our body is primarily made of water, and that definitely helps.
That's amazing. I have never thought of it that way. I've talked about that nature is the healing frequency. I think it's 582 hertz or something. I had not even thought about the power of just running your hands underwater or having a
Hmm.
shower if you can. And I think showers are the best because there's no distractions. I get so many downloads from showers. And
Yes.
that's
Yeah,
so
they've got an active
amazing.
audience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I love that.
Yeah.
Just running your hands underwater. That's amazing that you can connect to the power of nature from your sink. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I love that you distinguish between co the term coincidences and synchronicities. I love that word
Hmm.
synchronicities. It's such a beautiful word, I think, in any language. What are the
Yeah.
common signs and synchronicities? Maybe some that you've noticed, or how do you help your clients recognize them and identify meaning in them when they come across their path?
Yeah, and can't you even feel like a different energy between, oh, that was a coincidence and that was a
Mhm.
synchronicity. Like I smile
Yes.
when I say it.
Yes.
And right?
It's like
And
future
and
and hope. And yeah, yeah,
right, so
yeah.
language is huge for
Mhm.
our intuitive selves too. And you can feel that if you say those words, coincidence is almost like a throwaway line. Like
Mhm.
it's discarding what happened.
Mhm.
And when we say synchronicity, it's like, oh, that's cool. There's like some magic in there.
Yes.
And and that's the feeling of a sign. That's the feeling of tuning in, and that's getting very close, if not the feeling that you get when your intuition strikes. It's like it's trusting in the knowledge that you're getting, and it doesn't have to be spoken in language. It because intuition, when in knowing, there's no question attached. And knowledge doesn't operate in language. We give language to it.
Mm.
And so that intuitive state, just by practicing, you could say coincidence versus synchronicity and see how you feel, see how your chest feels, see how expansive it feels versus contracting when you say certain words. And that's just, again, these are like muscles that you're activating. It's just like exercise. It's just like practice. We've all gotten to the point that we've gotten through practice and we forget it so quickly once we've achieved it. But we didn't just go from kindergarten to college.
Mm.
There were lots of steps in between there. What's amazing about our intuitive sense, and where we are when we activate that in our lives is that it comes online very quickly because it has been trying to get our attention for many, many years. It's a sense that we're born with. It was unlearned, and then it was kind of cast aside as the more important, I put that in quotes, senses of how we live our life took hold. And we can go into all those reasons, but I won't right now. Um, and so an easy way to start with your signs, first of all, I've got to recommend a book by Laura Lynn Jackson called Signs. Um,
Okay.
it's amazing. Um, and one thing that she talks about that I've done many times is you can assign your sign. So
Mm.
you can say, basically, okay, intuition, show me this sign. And it can be something like a purple hippopotamus. And when I see that, then I know, like, then I will get the feeling of knowing. And it can be a cartoon, it can be on a commercial where a purple hippopotamus comes up, it can be in a children's book that you just walk by, but that sign will come up. But you do have to become aware and you
Mhm.
have to trust that it's coming up. It's not I'm going to prove you wrong because you are going to prove them wrong.
Mhm.
You are in control of proving them wrong. So it's going in with a very open spirit and in a playful imaginative way. And that's the first step that I take people through with their signs. And then when I work with my clients, it happens 9 times out of 10. We'll go through a session, and then I would say in the last 5 sessions, they'd say, "Oh, I have to tell you something funny that happened." And they will tell me the most magical sign that they had received, but they had discarded it. And so it's just a little bit of rejiggering of how we see the world and how we choose to interact with the world.
That feels really good to think that we can name our sign so that we're not I don't want to say vulnerable or a victim, that we're not just waiting, that we have some, and I don't want to say control or power, but if we're talking about the power of intuition, that does put us on the front foot where we're able to sort of name our sign.
Yeah,
And that way when it shows up, we know what it is.
yeah,
That's amazing. I will link to the
absolutely,
book Signs in the
absolutely.
show notes. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's an easy read. It's a fantastic read. I've gifted it to so many people, and she writes in a very easy story way.
It's interesting when we're talking about signs. Part of my story that I've shared, maybe a little on the show, but certainly in other places, is that I owned a company that was doing very well financially, and it was in the federal contracting space. And I realized that it was never going to be fulfilling for me because it didn't align with my values. And over a period of a few days, I received 9 signs that I could not do something for the money and keep my soul. And it wasn't that I had
Mhm.
declared the signs, but it was just something that maybe I had seen, or it was something that I drew back to something else in my mind from my past. But there can also be when someone is looking at making a major decision, and I think this is why I needed so many signs, is because there was a lot of
Mhm.
fear about what I was giving up. And even though it was
Absolutely.
familiar, it wasn't the best for me, but it was familiar and it was a huge risk to give it up. So, whenever someone is looking at making a huge step, whether that is in their business and they're looking to really up level themselves, let's say they want to start a capital campaign and now they've got to start talking to investors and donors, or it's like me where they're making a major career shift. How can they tell the difference between what is their intuition and then what are the like the fear that comes in that can kind of paralyze us?
Beautiful story. Great question. I'll say that I probably could have left my career in entertainment 2 to 3 years before I did.
Mm,
And I don't beat myself up for that at all. I needed to experience what I experienced, which was fear, which was all of the voices. What are you going to do after this? How are you going to support yourself? Even with my dad, I would fall back on that. Oh, but this is so. Look at all the perks that you get. Look at all the travel. Look at all the, what are you going to do with your time? All of those things that come through. What are people going to say? All of that. Until I got to a point where, very similar to what you just said, it was my soul.
mm,
And I was morphing into a person that I just did not recognize.
mm,
And one thing that was the tipping point of all that was I found myself saying, and again, I would say for 2 years on and off, I would say this to people where I would say, it's like talking to a wall. Working here is like talking to a wall. No one hears what I'm saying. It was at a time where in the entertainment industry is changing quite a bit, but it was, lots of layoffs, lots of condensing of businesses, lots of acquisitions, lots of duplication of roles, and people were scared just at the
mm,
top level of, oh my
mm,
God, this medium's changing. There's scarcity. There's not a lot of abundance, and that was filtering down, and I felt that deeply. And so I would say it's like talking to a wall. We're not moving forward. We're just kind of being in this safe space
mm,
that didn't have any forward momentum. And then one day I was in meditation and I was meditating and I saw this beautiful image, and it was an image of almost like a mirror image of myself that is looking straight into my eyes, saying, "It's like talking to a wall." And and I said,
wow.
"Ugh, that hurts."
Ouch.
And it was at that moment where I said, "Okay, it's time. It's
Mhm,
time to take this leap." And when I took the leap, I had spent so many days, so many months, so many years worrying about what was going to happen that that was all gone.
mhm,
Now my intuitive side had come on and said, okay, here we go. Now you're clear. Now you're able to get those downloads of what's next. Now we're able to guide you to meet new people that are going to help you on this journey. And what that felt like was when I was not in my intuitive self, when I was in my fearful self, I was a drag to be around.
mhm,
I was irritated. I remember saying to someone, I just don't want to be irritated anymore. I am irritated from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. I'm exhausted. My weekends are spent on the couch, just completely resting in order to muster up the energy to work 5 days a week again. I was restricted. I was gaining a lot of weight. I was holding on to that stress. I wasn't exercising. All of the things that I'm sure we've all gone through. I,
mhm,
I I know that there are cycles in my life when I've gone through that, and this one was a big one. And then when I made the decision to leave, I was free.
mhm,
And when you think of free, or when I think of freedom, I think of kind of like a bird where I'm light. I danced. I
mhm,
was singing. I was annoying to be around in the fact that I had swung the other way and I was finding joy in, blades of grass when people are like, shut up. But, but for me, it was a knowing again of, dang, you made the right decision. And
mhm,
any time that, that slippery self would come in and say, but that paycheck, I would I would have the tools at that point to say, no, I know what you're trying to do here. I know you're trying to pull me into it wasn't that bad situation when I know how I felt, and it was that bad. And that doesn't really end in for it didn't end for me for a couple years. So that was something that again, the universe, your intuitive self is going to be saying to you, you're sure, right? You're sure. And in order to start to live a more intuitive based life and to operate, you or I should say, but most people, I'm going to say you have to allow that portion of your brain to be in balance with the other portion. Doesn't mean that it takes it over and all the critical thinking goes out the window, but we're so reliant on that side most of the time
Mhm.
that it keeps us small.
Mhm.
And our intuition has no reason to keep you protected. It's not here for smallness.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of the feeling. And you could even feel it as I was telling that story when I was in my negative or critical or egoic mind, how I talked. And then when I got to that level of peace and of freedom, the energy lifted.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. And you mentioned 2 years. Are you saying that it takes
Mhm.
time to,
It does.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
sometimes it can be spontaneous, and like as I've continued on this journey, I'm much more able to be in tune with my body, and it's an instant yes and an instant no.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean that my critical mind doesn't come online and say you should have, but
Hmm.
that's not it. It doesn't have as much power
Hmm.
over it anymore, and I can feel
Hmm.
that in my body. It's a powerful drug when you're in that space,
Hmm.
and the entertainment industry for me provided a lot of glitz and glamour, provided a lot of easy ways to talk to people because
Hmm.
everyone that I was running in those circles with was interested
Hmm.
in that creative, was interested in those stories, was interested in that business.
Hmm.
Um, and so it became very much my identity. But then what I started to notice is that I was bifurcating myself. And when you start to bifurcate yourself, that's where the mess really starts to happen. Because, like we were saying, our souls weren't in it anymore. And you can't show up to a job soulless for very long.
One of the things that I found that was as soon as so making the decision was one thing, but as soon as I started clearing out the files, like literally clearing out the stuff in my physical space and my mental
Yeah.
space, but it was shocking the physical because it was so tangible. When I started moving the files out, that's when things started coming to me that I realized I could live this life that I dreamed of now. And it really came from, it was such a gift because it was when the tangible things were going out, more intangibles were coming in. It was amazing.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. No, that's such a good point because as you say that, I can see myself moving the files out and I
Mm-hmm.
can feel myself in resistance in that mode
Mm-hmm.
of like, oh, I remember that project, and
Yeah.
it was just kind of like a gray cloud. And again, not saying that at the time I was probably thrilled to be doing it. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
learning but it had
Yeah.
just changed, which is
Yeah.
not a bad thing at
So,
all.
and it's like we have to change to grow. Otherwise, we'd go to our graves doing the same thing we were doing when we were 25.
I know.
So thank
No,
God for
thank you.
that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think I just hope the listeners really hear this, that when it comes to being in tune with your intuition, it really does take time and it's a relationship, I think, isn't
Yeah,
it? Yeah. It's just
absolutely.
like you
Absolutely.
cultivate your relationship with your sister or your friend or your partner. It takes relationships, takes that time. A lot of social entrepreneurs, some of them are solopreneurs, so they're an army of one. And
Hmm.
even if they are an army of one, they have lots of people who are hanging on them and leaning on them for guidance and direction. And then some of them also have big teams with lots of different personality styles. And especially with social entrepreneurship, people are typically drawn to the mission or the
Hmm.
purpose of the social enterprise. How does, for a leader who begins to tap into their intuition, how can this ease the path when it comes to communicating with your team in your workplace?
Yeah. This is one of my favorite things to work with leaders on because I always get resistance right at the front.
Mm-hmm.
And then we work through it. And by the end, the result is magical to watch. There's a difference here with your intuition, and it's not talking points. It's very much your experiences, and it's very much talking kind of in a new way that allows your team to be inspired on a creativity level. And
Mm,
again, no matter where you are in the business, even if you're very much analytics and scientific on that side, there's room for this creativity. That's your zone of genius. So there's playfulness in here because of the mission and the purpose that you just mentioned. When depending on whatever project that they're working on, I always have them start with the intention of the project. And again, the company can have the full mission and that's fantastic, but bringing it into a real tangible in the now, in the
mm,
present of what you're working on. So we'll start with an intention and just that word alone starts to trigger some like, is this woo woo? Is this whatever? No, it's not. Let's just take that out. Just say the word intention,
mm,
you know, and we'll go through that. And then whatever that intention is, that's what everybody's on the same page around.
mm,
And people can have, their input into it, but it's very much an intention is kind of outside of the ego, outside of
mm,
the self. It's what we're doing for the collective. And then under that are goals. And
mm,
those goals can be very personal to each person. They are probably going to feed an ego on some level, and that's fine as long as we've got it in balance with the intention that we always kind of circle back up to. And so when we're able to know the difference between those two, you're already starting to tap into your intuition because what you can then come back to, if you've got someone in your team that is maybe struggling with something, okay, let's go to the goal. Then does the goal fit the intention?
mm,
And that starts to signal a left brain, right brain.
mm, mhm.
It's very subtle, but it does. And so that's just one of the first tips that I'll talk with executives about.
And when they do this, do you have their teams really resonate with that?
They light up because it's
Yeah.
different. They're all working for a collective, but then they're all have their originality, their
Hmm.
uniqueness, whatever their genius is to work on, they're able to shine in that way. And
Hmm.
so you're working on these two levels at the same time. There's also tactical things that you can point to.
Hmm.
So what I've seen more often is that it opens up discussions.
Hmm.
Okay, what about, this? What if we, took this project in this way? And it's not more about, I want to do this for this project next. It's more, what if we, and it moves as more of a collective than an individual, just trying to get the recognition that, that their small self really
Hmm.
is looking for.
What if we? That's amazing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think too, I like the idea of setting an intention first and then the goals because there's so many things that our ego would say, you can do this, you could do that, you should, all the shoulda, could have. But the intention
Right.
really helps us narrow those down and help us just realize what goals are for us for right now. Maybe the rest are for later, or something's for later. Maybe something doesn't even matter anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And another interesting factor is that someone that might be stuck on something that doesn't feed the overall intention, that goal might spark the next intention. So it
Hmm.
can work both ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And doing this as a team is, I think, a real game changer because everyone can feel heard, and whatever's coming up for them might be their next area of greatness that they're stepping into. And so it's
Absolutely.
amazing.
Absolutely.
I want to circle back to meditation. We talked about, I mentioned quiet time. You talked about that was such an amazing tip about getting out in nature, and even as something as simple as running your hands underwater if you're not able to get out. Meditation can be an overwhelming thing because it's for a lot of people because they envision this sitting for a half hour in a quiet space with a candle or maybe even longer and with music or something or even in silence, and that just doesn't seem practical. As you're
Mhm.
working with entrepreneurs who maybe have not meditated before or maybe they're up leveling their meditation practice and you're making it more practical and tangible for them. What's your advice for someone just starting to meditate, and how can they gradually add that into their lives?
I can't tell you how many people are like, I can't meditate. Well, you can't if that's if you say you
Yeah.
can't, I believe you. Um, but everybody can. I'll start with 2 minutes of
Mhm.
meditation. 2 minutes. Do you have
Mhm.
120 seconds? And I always like to recommend the app Insight Timer because it's got a
Mhm.
timer on
Like
there
that.
and it also
Mhm.
kind of tracks and it's got so many free guided meditations.
Mhm.
And you can do it by length, you can do it by how you're feeling. It's a wonderful resource. I'm sure that there's others that are just as wonderful. That's just the one that I use. And your meditation doesn't necessarily need to be sitting in a room cross-legged in pure darkness with a candle lit. It doesn't need to be at all. If that's the way that you like to do it, fantastic. You can also be outside and listening to birds for 2 minutes. And I always like to also talk about meditation. It's not it is of course quieting the mind, but we don't get there immediately. That's, our mind can have, I think, 1,000 thoughts in a second. I mean, that's just how we're wired. This is part of this whole experience here on Earth. What I'll say is for the overactive mind, that's fantastic because what you're trying to do is kind of catch your thoughts and be like, oh, you're coming in again. I'm just going to place you on this cloud and let you kind of float away. Oh, you're coming in again. And being able to be aware that you're being interrupted
Mhm.
is meditation.
Mhm.
That's meditation. So if you can't meditate, you're probably excelling at meditation
Mhm.
because you're seeing those thoughts come in and getting and instead of getting frustrated, it's changing that mindset of like, oh man, I'm onto you. I'm aware of you now. Like I've got you. I've got you. So being able to not look at it as I failed this, it's oh my God, I caught 50 thoughts in 2 minutes. Dang, that's interesting.
Yeah, just being aware and realizing that how much chatter is going going through.
Yeah,
That's amazing. Yeah.
that's it.
That's great
That's it. That's
advice. So
meditation.
2 minutes listening to birds, insight timer, whatever, just super simple. Amazing.
Yeah. And there's a great app now. Sorry, I'm just like throwing out all these resources, but
Yeah.
there's I love to hear the birds. Um, and I wouldn't do this during meditation, but you can put this on is there's a Merlin app and
Hmm.
Merlin Bird ID and it picks up the sounds of the birds and then tells you what birds were chirping.
Oh, yeah.
If you're even on a walk and put that on, I find that to be extremely soothing, very meditative,
Hmm.
because you're just, they're communicating. They're
Hmm.
communicating. That's how they communicate. So
Yeah.
just another little tip.
Yeah. I like that tip because that's also about turning down the volume on other things. You're turning up the volume on the sound of the birds, turning down the volume on the chatter in your head. I will link to Insight Timer. I have that. So I'll link to Insight Timer in the show notes and I'll check out the Merlin app and link to that too. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
fun.
So, Jen, you've obviously been through a lot in your life. You experienced a lot of tragedy at a young age and have lived kind of the highs and some of the glitz and glam. And now you're working in probably your forever vocation. What's your why? What keeps you going on the tough days? I'm sure that even if you're working in your dream vocation, life is not always easy. What keeps you going?
I always have support.
Mm.
There are people rooting for me. There is energy rooting for me.
Mhm.
And there is, I'll say a higher self, our intuitive self is operating on a plane that we can't physically touch, but
Mhm.
knowing that they're just not going to let me fall. And
That's
that keeps
amazing.
me going. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've been brought this far. You're not going to get dropped now. That's amazing.
No.
No. Before I ask my last question, Jen, how do people find you? What's the best way to connect with you?
Probably through my website. It's
Okay.
Jenn, Jenn. I always
Mhm.
like to say that. It's Jenn with
Mhm.
two N's, Cohen, intuitive.com. And you can
Great.
email me there. You can reach out. I could talk about this for hours. I can, supply tools and tips, but please reach out. I'm available.
Fantastic. It has been so timely having you on the show at this wrapping up the season because there was so much that I really wanted people to feel empowered and inspired that they could take things to the next level. But I also at the same time I'm creating this, I'm like, but not everything is for them right now. And I really appreciate you coming on the show. The chat about intuition is so important just on a live scale, but how we make decisions when there's so much noise and so much chatter. And so this has been really helpful for you to not just talk about intuition, but for help people to understand what's right for them right now and what they can just let go, put it on the cloud and let it go.
That's
So,
right.
Jenn,
That's right.
what's next on the horizon for you? What are you most excited about?
Oh, I just launched a membership program, which I'm
Oh,
really excited about because it, depending on where you are in your intuitive journey, whether you're
mhm,
just starting or whether kind of like what you said, you're having those really hard days and you just need little reminders of what you've learned along the way just to boost you in this season. I'm really proud of it. I'm really excited about it, and it's like you said. Now was the time to launch that. It feels really
yeah.
right.
Well, we will link to Jenn's website and Jenn to your website in the show notes. And if for all of you who are listening, I encourage you to check this out on YouTube because Jenn is just a beautiful spirit and she just radiates love and joy and compassion. And I think that your day is going to be better just by seeing her face. And Jenn, we
Oh,
really appreciate you pouring into us today. You've made a huge difference for me, and I know for the listeners as well.
well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.